you aren't being a proper woman, therefore you must be a witch. You must be a witch.
Welcome to the Missing Witches podcast with Kenya Coviak, who was sent to me by Dr. Yvonne Chireau, who you heard from earlier in the season, who wrote that incredible book, Black Magic. And when I asked Dr. Chireau if she had anyone that she felt like I should talk to, she sent me this amazing introduction to Kenya, saying that you're one of the few rare, real live Black American witches who knows about the old traditions and can speak to you as an expert. Thank you so much for being here and talking about Detroit Conjure and folk magic.
Well, this should be fun. This should be a lot of fun.
I wondered if you wanted to introduce yourself to our listeners. There's probably so much more about you that you can tell us than what I can tell them.
Well, I can give you a brief intro. I'm a witch who grew up on 7 Mile. That's about it. No, I'm just teasing. But I am. I'm from Detroit. I was born and raised in Detroit, and I moved a little bit farther north a few years ago. I am the originator and founder of the Detroit Conjure and Folk Magic Festival. I used to be the local coordinator for Detroit's Pagan Pride Day. I used to be on the board, I think I still am, of the Ancient Faiths Alliance Company. It's an organization to promote all different faiths. I am a writer at Pagan Business Network. I am also the founder and originator of the Wandering Goddess Festival Retreat that we have here in Michigan. I am currently the new owner, as of last year, of the Michigan Witches Ball and the Midwest Witches Bazaar. I had volunteered for many years. I am also now the person who will be running the Little Witches Ball up here. I at one time served as the administrator of the Michigan Pagan Scholarship Fund. And I am also part of the Great Lakes Witches Council. I'm one of the founders, along with my husband, Kyle Coviak, and a few other people. And we run the Good Witch Bafana program in Michigan, where we give food and material gift support during the winter solstice to children in need and families in need. We did not do that last year due to illness. We will not be able to do it because of COVID this year, unfortunately. I was also the person who was behind the pantry here, because Great Lakes Witches Council also runs our own secret food pantry of last resort. But with all the food programs, we don't have to do that now. And I am a frequent presenter at local festivals, a few conventions. I did Convocation last year. And I did Hex Fest this year, and I'm really excited. I did Convocation this year too. I get confused. And I just did the Michigan Magic and Machine virtual festival. Okay, I think that's everything for right now.
I feel like I'm both tired and inspired just listening to the list. I feel like you're clearly like a hero organizer witch. What does it mean for you to build community in that way? Like, I love talking to organizers. I'm obsessed with that. And it seems like such an important way for you that you have done your work and spent your energy. Can you just talk to me about that?
Okay, so I have scaled back a bit, due to because of health issues as far as the COVID and everything, but I do still keep my hand in a little bit. I keep telling people I'm trying to retire. I've been saying that for 5 or 6 years now, so let's see how that goes. But I think that when I was coming up, my dog is getting weird again. When I was coming up, the way that it worked, we didn't have the access we have now. It was after the Starhawk and Buckland Revolution, but the way that it worked, you kind of had to know where the different things were. to be able to find community. Oh, somebody would write on a slip of paper, go down this street and turn this corner and you will find this magic shop, and with the E on the end, of course, and then you must walk therein and talk to the woman behind the counter who is of auburn hair, and she shall open the gates of knowledge to thee, and you shall find community. And now it's like, okay, just Google it, and or like look on the message board and like meet up, and you could like probably meet like some sort of like super Thelema group that also has potluck and bowling on Saturday.
Right.
Just fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I like bowling. I'm not good at it, and I love potluck. I'll change my religion for potluck. But yeah, there's
Well, yeah, I love a potluck.
But trying to find community and all that is kind of challenging because again, you don't forge those in-person responses. You don't form those. Okay, did you have the same experience trying to find this shop? Let's make that our opening to talk. You know, the conventions are a way that we get together. They call them cons in order to talk to each other. But what happens in between? You know, we have wonderful organizations here, most of them founded by Gordon Ireland in Michigan. He's going to kill me for mentioning him because he tried to retire. You'll never retire. And he did, though. But we have Pagans in Need, which came out of the Federation of Circles and Solitaires here in Michigan. And they were part of the charities board, and they were people who would step up in between those times of just buying things from vendors or going to convocation or things like that. They were that missing piece. They offered fellowship, community, and they would, you know, the food, flat out food, you know, you were hungry, something happened, you don't want to go to a church because, you know, they may judge you or they may give you a hard time or turn you away outright, but they didn't judge. And now it's been reincarnated or reformed into PIN, which is Pagans in Need Lansing. And it's run by a wonderful man named Bill Ellie. And he actually is making it sing, but without that kind of community support, without that kind of community continuity, you know, what happens is we just have a bunch of people who come together to shop, or just sometimes their circles or covens or groves will overlap. And that's not what the goal is, I don't think. I think the goal is to become fully engaged and part of the overall society, you know, more so than consumers and just people who stay in their houses and read books.
Yes, I mean the like goal of becoming more than consumers, I think, is so perfectly said for what all of us are like fighting for our lives to do right now. I did want to come back to talking more about Detroit and the kind of magic that you find there. And the kind of people that practice there, what the community is like. You have been so deeply integrated there, and your husband too. So I don't know, we're doing an episode on Yvonne's book on Black magic and thinking more about that Southern history of magic coming up. And I know you and your husband have talked about how Detroit is special in its magic for being this meeting place of Southern magic and immigrant magic. Can you talk more about that?
Yes, I can. Okay, so I guess the best way to do it is like this. All right, so let's just say it's a typical day in Detroit, and I'm going to make it a non-typical day. You decide to fill your day with magic. You get up in the morning. There's at least 6 or 7 different cultural magical shops you could visit. But you decide before you do that, you're going to go get a reading. So you go to Hamtramck area in Detroit, which is a city inside the city, which is Polish. It is very much Polish, but although it's Polish, there's also a huge Bengali and Pakistani population as well. But you go to the Polish city inside the city of Detroit, and you go there and you go up the steps and you wind up talking to someone from the mountains of Appalachia not Appalachia, and they give you a reading, and her sister's the one that does the reading, and she's blind. So you have to go in there with your parents, and everybody gets their reading one at a time in the back room. All right, so you leave, and you decide, okay, that's all fine and good, but I need to get a different reading for another person. So you decide to go to Greektown, and you go to Greektown, and you go in there, you get some coffee, okay? And once you get your coffee, you go next to St. Peter and Paul Church, which one day I'll tell you the story of that altar, because it was a trip. It was the most cursed altar ever. But you go to St. Peter and Paul Church, and then you make yourself a turn, and you go back into the neighborhood, and you go past the Sicilian and the Italian neighborhoods, and you go past the black neighborhood from the Mississippi and Arkansas, because different areas come up here. Some parts are Tennessee, some parts are Arkansas. You go past that area, past the Mississippi area, and you talk to somebody there. And instead of winding up being able to get the information you need from the Greek person, they're like, oh, we're out, go over there. And you wind up talking to somebody who's Baltic. And the Baltic person gives you all the information that you need. Great. You decide to take a picnic on the island. It happens to be a Saturday. That's Belle Island Park. You go to Belle Isle Park, and it's the right Saturdays, because why? You're driving on the side of the island on the other side where the lighthouse is. You go down a little further, and you see a huge congregation of black people in white clothing. And it's not a church congregation at all. It's just a gathering of white people who are honoring African traditional religion, and they're making offerings to the water, and they're doing rituals and ceremonies there. And you just happen to see it, walk by, pick yourself some honeysuckle, and it's all good. Grab some black currant leaves, because you want to do some money magic later. It's all good. You keep on going. You decide to go sit down near the lighthouse. But before you did, you put some stuff in the water because there was a spell you needed to do, but you couldn't do it where you first stopped because you put so many spells under the willow trees there. You can't stop just anywhere, because everybody knows that everybody has put stuff on under the willow trees on Belle Isle, and you have to remember which ones you used. So then you did that. So then you drove off of Belle Isle after having a nice picnic lunch. You start on your way back, and you say, hey, I need some candles. So you go to Oak Park, which is just outside, and you go to one of the shops, get yourself a couple of cases of candles, and everything's fine. But your friend calls you on the phone, says, hey, I need you to drop back down the Gratiot Avenue and go to Detroit. I need a case of candles that have been blessed by Oshun, or dedicated to Oshun and some other deity. And you go down there and you take care of that. And then you say, oh, wait, let me stop by Eastern Market. You go by Eastern Market, and there's some Romanians there, okay? And they're hanging out because you know them and they know you, and it's all good. And next thing you know, you say, hey, let me stop off. I forgot to get what I needed from there. You go to Eastern Market, go to Discount Candle. You go in there. There's a New Hampshire witch who used to own it, but now it's owned by someone else. So you go in there. You go in there and get a whole different kind of spell work, but they don't have everything you need. So now you got to go to Southwest Detroit, which is also known as Mexican Town. You go on the other side of town to the Luckin Booth, and you wind up going there, and you get your cards read, and you wind up buying some stuff that nobody else makes. But you know what? You've got a problem. What's your problem? You don't have anywhere to go out with your friend tonight. Oh, wait, it's Saturday night. Let me go to the Tangent Gallery, which is where all the hippies and the anarchists hang out. And Shiva Honey, who is one of the most well-written Satanists in our area, who just came out with a book, because she runs one of the satanic groups in Detroit on the deeper Southwest, and the other anarchist collective. You go down there, and you're like, hey, let's go hang out at the Tangent Gallery because they're going to have a party. All right, to go down to the party, it just turns out, guess what? There's a whole other witch group that has nothing to do with the one that you usually hang out with. And they're all hanging out and they're partying together and doing a ritual. Good times, good times. The next day you get up, you say, hey, what do I have to do next week? Oh, I need to pay for my ticket to Convocation, because Convocation, they're going to have some black ceremonial magicians there, as far as black magic, not black ethnicity. And they're probably going to have, if I'm not mistaken, they're going to have a couple of people there who practice Lukumi, maybe some fairy magic, because, I haven't done fairy magic in a minute. Oh, and definitely the vampires are going to be there, House Kepru. So I'm going to go there. Because, I just went to gather because most of the people in this community on this side of town are into that. So, hey, but, it's not the DVC, which is the Detroit Vampire Community, which is a little bit of a crossover. So you're going to say, all right, well, let's all get our calendars synced up and everything. And you sync up your calendar. Next thing you know, you're hungry again. It's the next day. You want to kind of go out and have a drink. Guess what? If you go back to Hamtramck and make a right and go to Highland Park, which is a city adjacent to Hamtramck, You can go to the Black Hole Collective, also known as Namby's Place, and hang out possibly with the people who used to know the Detroit Witch. Guess what? She does old school hoodoo, but so do a lot of other people too. And you can go in there and deal with comedic magic. And you might pick up a couple of ankhs and some other things because you're not far from the Shrine of the Black Madonna, about maybe 20 minutes. Go over there, talk to the Black Christian nationalists who actually do practice old school magic. But now your aunt just said, I need you to go pick up some holy water. So you wind up going down to one of the missionary Baptist churches, pick up some holy water and some blessed oil, because those practitioners practice hoodoo from Bible, and they have already blessed everything for you. And they probably gave you a side eye because they know a witch when they see one. And then you go home and relax and turn on Charmed and laugh.
I feel like you just taught a master class in seeing Detroit through the eyes of a real witch. I'm just going to listen and picture myself in your city. It was amazing.
Now, if you're unfortunate enough to be one of the victims of Kenya Coviak in one of her classes, let's all take a moment and pour some liquor out for them. And and you were in her grove, then you might have the unfortunate moment of being outside, walking through the mud in swamps and everything else, pulling up plants and leaving offerings because you need to learn your plants. But in exchange for that, you're also learning how to make cordage, and you're also learning to make your own magical map of power spots throughout the region on a map. And most of the people in the city know where these power spots are, because the people who have moved into Detroit think people are up to no good all the time when they're wandering around alone at night. And I'm going to tell you right now, 50% of the time, they're just looking at somewhere to actually drop off an offering or some kind of work without being seen.
I love that you teach your students a power map of your city.
I think everyone should do that. I think everyone should try to find the power spots and the dead zones. If you were to stop the Detroit River, which you can't, but if you were to stop the Detroit River and have it dry for a minute, you'd find so many bottle spells, you could probably make an entire dam out of glass.
I feel like especially in these crazy COVID times when so many people are quarantining and listening to these podcasts, people like me will re-listen to that story you just told us, that walkthrough of the city, and imagine that they're outside and in these magical places. And maybe bring them closer to you.
You have so many activists as well, on both sides, believe it or not, of certain issues in this country right now. And matter of fact, there's a witch in Midland, and she is, now Midland's quite a way, don't get it wrong, it's over 2 hours. But again, it kind of spreads out. It's its own little pocket, but they come down here. She was at the protests here. And she's running a mobile BLM memorial project. That's her baby. So, and she also does other things. She writes poetry. And then we have that overlap between her. She comes down from Midland to go to Pagan Fest, which is a camping festival here in Michigan. It's an international festival. And then people get together and meet up there. And then they wind up carrying that fellowship onward. And when they're at Pagan Fest, sometimes what winds up happening, there's other community bonds. People put together records. They put together, listen to me, records. I'm old. They put together CDs. We've got people who are comic book artists. There's a young lady now. One young lady just opened up her own. She only did her own book. Another one did her own graphic novel or comic books. So she opened up her own publishing company. And these are both young witches, and they're both based from Detroit. So you've got all of these things going on interconnected to show that every walk of life in society is now in this particular time beginning to not separate themselves from, okay, this is my mundane life, this is my magical life, and never the two shall meet. No, now we're beginning to live fully in ourselves, and it's really wonderful to see.
Yeah, I'm glad it feels like that. There's this movement of something that's wonderful to see around you where you are right now. Can you talk about how you're doing in Detroit? How are you guys? It's 2020. It's a shit show. How are you feeling? How are you doing?
Okay, so I know you saw the movie 8 Mile, or heard of it at least. So I'm on the other side of 8 Mile now. I moved north, but most of my family is south. So I go to Detroit all the time, right? So here's what's happening. I've been down at the demonstrations, and I'm going to call them what they are, demonstrations. We're not going to address the police riot situation where people, can walk in and declare something a riot that's actually a First Amendment gathering. I'm not going to make that about this today. But I've been down there to document these things. And from what I can see, it's an amplification of the carpetbagging and the gentrifying that was already occurring in the 90s. And because of that, pockets of the city have been left behind. And that's caused a greater divide. When I worked in Detroit in a family service worker assistant position, we had about a 40 to 45% functional literacy rate, in many of the areas. And it wasn't about race, as far as demographics. It was simply about geographical and class location and economic income. And that divide has gotten even stronger because instead of trying to develop the people in the city, they have done a large amount of recruitment to bring people from outside of not only the city, but the state back to the city. Now, how does this affect us as witches? Well, I'm going to tell you, there's a whole new crop of people who are, and then this happens, every generation, that are starting stores and practices, as is, that's good. But what's happening is we're finding, and when I say we, I'm using the general we, from my generation, we're finding that they are being somewhat given pre-packaged kind of ramen noodle magic courses. Add water and stir for 3 minutes and you too can be a witch. And it's kind of like disappointing. And, there are other shops where they've been here forever, and they're kind of like standoffish. So, where are they going to go? You got the two extremes. Luckily, we have some shops that have been around forever that are holding the line of, this is not about an exclusive social club, and this is not a 5-minute lesson. This is, okay, how much of your life do you want to devote to this? How much do you want to put in? Because whatever you put in is what you get out. And in that, they are beginning to discover, the newcomers are beginning to discover that, yes, Detroit has different factions as far as cultural contributions to our overall practice of Detroit conjure and magic. And when I say conjure, I'm not just talking about conjuration like I conjure the creature of art. I mean the whole pharmacy part, the pharmaceutical part about healing, being a root doctor or an herbal practitioner. And that because we are an international port, have the blessing and the grace to have so many cultures here that contribute not only their magics, but their folklore and their folk remedies and their other practices to everything. And as these young people are finding, and not just young in age, but young people in the craft are finding places and pockets where, hey, look, there's more to it than just grabbing a random book off the shelf and watching Charmed, which, I love the old Charmed. Nothing wrong with it. But, they're finding that there's more to life than grabbing a smudge stick from Five Below and having at it.
You describe it perfectly. There is this wave of people who I think, like myself, like many of us, dip their toes in because we don't have a ritual to turn to when we need it or whatever it is that brings us first in. But the real fascinating life work enriching stuff is finding those people who've practiced for a long time. And getting to meet with them and ask them questions. So I'm really thankful for you being here with us today. Can you talk more? I wanted you to know that when you talked about the Black Lives Matter protests that you're still seeing in Detroit, that we are very much with you in your feeling there, and then you're bringing that part of the story into where you're at right now. That's part of what's happening in Detroit, and after the repeated murders and violence against Black people in your country and in mine, the people that are out there still protesting in the face of COVID are heroes for all of us. So I didn't want to brush by that without saying that. I wondered if you wanted to talk to us more about your own history and how did you come to know this magic? Who brought you to where you are?
Well, let's see. I was already born weird, so that was the first problem. But the thing was is that
there's so many of us.
I was in class. I was in school, and I was doing little bitty spells when I was really small, but I didn't know what they were. Children, and I would see things that other people couldn't see. That's fine. My parents were doing stuff. I didn't recognize what it was at that age. I didn't even recognize it 2 years later. And I was in class, and there was this wonderful story. I'm still trying to find out the name of the story. I can't remember. It was a reading list, and in this reading list book, there was a book that this little girl wound up being friends with another little girl who had just moved to town. And the girl who moved to town was a witch. She was a little girl who said she was a witch, had belladonna in her bag, was trying to make spells with a little bag, like parcel post, things like that. And I was like, and this was a little Black girl in a book. And I was like, that is the life for me. And well, that's part of it. Plus I was reading Scott Cunningham's books in the library, Lincoln Branch Library, and reading health books on lemongrass tea and things. Now, understand, I was in grade school, but I used to read way above my level. I mean, I was given the grace to be gifted, so I could really, I got bored quickly. So the librarian came over, and she saw me. I had climbed to the top of the stacks, and I grabbed a really interesting book. It was great. And I was having fun and everything. And, had my little Llewellyn book next to it. And I was reading this book, having a good old time. And she comes by and says, oh, here, let me give you this. And she gives me a different Cunningham book, the Encyclopedia of Magical Herbs, right? Because the book I was reading was the Hierarchy of Demons or something. And she decided, we're just going to come in and shut that right on down. We're going to shut that down because this is not where you need to be yet. If you're going to go there, not yet. So she gave me the Scott Cunningham book, and she let me read the books on Chaldean numerology and whatnot. And she was a really great librarian. The whole library, they were awesome. I really believe they were witches just because now looking back, some of them were crystals. But that was kind of where it started, and it went from there. And then at 13, I was already doing spells at that point, but at 13, I got my first tarot deck, and I met a man. He was a Sikh, and his name was Ali. He owned a shop called the Monkey's Paw. So this Sikh is teaching me, and he also had this, I believe he was a French and Welsh man there, if I'm not mistaken, who was also assisting. And at the counter, she was selling the jewelry for the little shop. She was a necromancer. And so she was teaching me stuff too. Now, this is at 13. This is a bit much. And but, just little stuff that I could understand. So they started me with magical oils. So let's start here. Oils and stones. We'll start here. And that's basically when I first started my formal stuff.
Wow, I have to give love to witch librarians. I was so happy when you said that. I feel like so many of the librarians I've met have been secret witches, and I love that they just put the right books in your hands and were quiet. That's so rad. That's so beautiful.
I know about 7 witch librarians here in the Metro Detroit area.
Oh my gosh. I love that. And I feel like so many of our listeners are quietly cheering. We've had witch librarians write into us before, like helping us find books that we were trying to remember from our childhood too. So witch librarians, if you're listening, help Kenya find that book from her childhood, write into us. We will pass it on to her. Kenya, can you share with us maybe, and this is asked with all respect for the things you can't share, but what's your own ritual or practice been like these days? We are in strange quarantine times. We're indoors and we're dealing with it at a distance and in our own versions in Canada, but you are directly in the world of Trump and insanity and all the violence that entails. How have you been taking care of yourself? What have your rituals been like?
Mostly I've been focusing on green magic, on making remedies, teaching. I found that for some reason, my practices are quirky because they go back to weird stuff. Yeah, okay, weird, but weird in the real way, weird. And I like to work with my hands a lot. So, I've taught some classes in clay magic, in thorn magic, making sure the gardens are growing proper magical herbs, helping people learn how to do their own candle magic. One of the things that I was blessed with is that I'm able to craft words well sometimes, and I like to cover stories of witches who are out there on the front lines. So that's one of the things I've been doing to try to focus on making a difference. But some things I've been doing that are strictly magical, I've been very conservative in how much energy I'm expending, because I expect as we get closer to the end of October, I will need to do some heavy duty, I'll just say works.
Yeah, I think right now for all of us, protecting our energy feels really important.
Something else that I'm looking at, I'm trying to get people into the healing arts right now. But it's not just so much physical healing. It's not about the empath or the psychological either. It's energetic healing. You have to know how to heal a space. You have to know how to heal a crowd. I'm not going to talk about how to do it here, obviously, because it's something I only teach certain people, but you can completely change the energy of a crowd. And most people will wind up learning how to do this as they go through the craft, but I'm trying to be very, very mindful that we have to begin to deploy people who know how to calm a crowd down. That is something that is critical right now because things are spiraling out of control.
Yeah, I mean, I can only relate to that from the perspective of an artist or hosting an event where you do feel those moments where the entire balance or energy of a room depends on you in that moment, that there are those moments that feel like tipping points. And if you can command that attention of that energy and shift it, then I think that there's a possibility for some redemptive moments there. I'm glad you're teaching people how to do that.
Not many though, not many anymore. I've been very elusive. He's kind of got me bubble wrapped because I'm a chronic asthmatic with other immunodeficiency issues. So he's kind of my husband's kind of bubble wrapping me so I don't go out too much. But I do teach sometimes. I will say this. I will say this very much. If you are beginning to look forward through oracular divination and decided to look at our country, this country here, you'd probably need yourself a jack and a beer back. Lots of heavy drinking involved.
Oh my goodness. I don't know. I feel like drinking has been a little bit too much of a coping mechanism for me this year. But I can feel how there's darker days ahead with this. What do you, if people can't maybe reach you as a teacher in the ways they might have before, which I think is good. You got to keep yourself so safe with this. I'm glad your husband's looking out for you. But what would you say to listeners who hear this for how they might consider protecting themselves or becoming those energy workers for peace? People maybe in the United States or in Canada or around the world who want to send you support. We'd like to end sometimes with a suggestion from our guest of a ritual or a practice or something people can do.
Okay, so one of the things that, and I won't ramble, but one of the things I would like to point out as far as that goes is that the first thing to do is to ward yourself, to seal yourself to a point. I know that people want to be empathic. Every time is not the right time for that. So that's the first thing. The second thing, maybe invest in a small amulet. It doesn't, or something to wear around your neck. It does not have to be metal. It doesn't have to be from a shop. You can go buy, you can go find an amulet or buy and create a talisman or even small charms to protect yourself. I highly recommend drawing sigils on yourself if you're going into a dangerous situation. One of my young people that I really admire, he is in Salem right now, and he was there for the riot there in Salem at a demonstration, and he drew sigils and protective symbols all over himself so that he would be safe during the action there. So I highly recommend that. That's another thing that they can do. And then if they're really concerned, make a light or a lamp with something protective. Or if you're trying to make sure that people get away unscathed and are not seen, throw something in there to help with that. Maybe some mayapple or sow thistle to help conceal them so they don't get harmed. Okay, I just think that we should remember who we are. We've come a long way as a species, as a people, as a series of, or a group of cultures and spiritual beings and souls. And we need to remember that even though the person that stands across from us may have hate in their heart, may have ideas that we feel are wrong or odious or offensive or even dangerous, we have to remember that we are all of us human, and that, sometimes peace is not the way. Sometimes you have to defend yourself, or defend another person. But at the end of everything, you have to continue to hold in yourself that we are all humans, we are all people, we are all souls. And when you get to that part, you begin to remember that there's a little bit more outside that physical form that you're dealing with when you're in proximity to those people or to those cultures or to those countries. And because of that, you definitely can change everything you encounter, everything you touch with your own powerful energy and your own focused will and thought. Hey, what do they say? She changes everything she touches. You change everything you touch too.
Thanks so much, Kenya. I feel like pretty lit up and inspired by that. Thank you again for being with us and for sharing so much with our listeners and with me. I really want to extend all of our listeners. We sort of talk about the covenants made between our ears and the dark between our ears by being in this podcast space together. So I want to imagine that all of our listeners are with us and closing their eyes and sort of reaching out to surround you and protect you. And thank you for everything that you are teaching and sharing, and to keep you healthy so that we can be part of the giant bubble wrap that your husband is wrapping you in. I will send that bubble wrap to each other too. Stay safe, everybody.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me. You have a wonderful night and be safe.
You must be a witch.
Don't forget to go to foxglovefarm.com and use offer code MissingWitches.